You are a total embarrassment, don't pretend you matter. My mom said. We only invite you so people feel sorry for us, my uncle joked. I raised my glass, smiled, and said, good thing pity pays well. My book just hit #1 on Amazon today. My aunt nearly choked on her wine as I showed them my royalty check. I went to a family gathering I wasn't even sure I'd be invited to after everything that's happened. My mom never really approved of me after I divorced my ex-husband, Peter. She always thought I was throwing my life away. My uncle's a sarcastic jerk who thinks my writing career is a joke, and my aunt acts like I'm some kind of failure who's just barely keeping it together. But this time, I decided to show them that I've done more than they ever thought I could. My book just hit #1 on Amazon, and let's just say, the looks on their faces when I showed them my royalty check were priceless. I wasn't sure why I had agreed to come to the family dinner tonight. Maybe it was the chance to prove something to them. Or maybe I just wanted to see them again, despite everything. It had been years since I'd been invited to one of these gatherings, and I figured this might be my only opportunity to make them see me differently. The old family house in Derby Hills stood in front of me like a relic from the past. The house was still as grand as I remembered, but it felt cold now. The laughter and warmth I once associated with family gatherings had long faded. Now it felt like a house full of judgments and awkward silences. I hesitated before ringing the doorbell, but eventually, I did. The door swung open, and there was my mom, Edna. She was still as sharp as ever, her face tight with disapproval the moment she laid eyes on me. You're late, she said, her voice cool. There wasn't even the slightest hint of affection in her tone. Sorry, I mumbled, walking past her into the foyer. The usual family tension filled the air like it always had, the unspoken judgment that seemed to suffocate me every time I came here. My mom didn't approve of my choices. She never had. The divorce, the writing career, she had never understood it. I stood in the living room, taking in the sight of my relatives. My older brother, Mark, was there, sitting on the couch, his eyes glued to his phone. He didn't look up when I entered. My older sister, Lynn, was chatting with Aunt Ruth at the dining table, her voice too loud, trying to command attention as usual. And then there was Uncle Ralph, who always had a way of making me feel like I wasn't good enough, as if I were just some small joke in his life. The room was full of polite conversation, the kind where no one says what they really mean. I took a deep breath and walked to the kitchen where dinner was already being served. My mother was still at the door, standing as if she were waiting for me to say something, but I didn't. I wasn't here to apologize or beg for approval. I was here to show them who I had become. Dinner was the same as it always was, awkward. Everyone sat around the table, eating, but no one really spoke. Aunt Ruth, however, looked at me like she was trying to figure out why I was even there. So, how's the writing business going? Aunt Ruth asked, her voice high-pitched as if she didn't care, but she wanted to say something. I picked up my glass of wine, hesitated for a moment, and then replied, it's going well. I just had my latest book hit #1 on Amazon today. The room froze. The clink of silverware stopped, and I could feel everyone's eyes on me. My mom, sitting at the far end of the table, didn't even glance at me. She just kept eating, pretending she hadn't heard. #1 on Amazon? Uncle Ralph's voice broke the silence, his words laced with sarcasm. What's it about? How to embarrass your family. There it was. The mockery. The exact thing I'd expected, the thing that always seemed to follow me when I tried to share any bit of success with them. I swallowed hard, but I didn't let the sting show. Actually, I said, lifting my glass and meeting his eyes, good thing pity pays well. I just got my royalty check. Want to see it? Uncle Ralph scoffed, and Aunt Ruth raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting me to say anything like that. My mother didn't even react. She probably didn't even care. She had never been the type to celebrate anything I did unless it was exactly what she expected. But I pulled out the envelope from my bag and placed it in front of Aunt Ruth. It was the first time I'd ever showed any of them the tangible result of my success. The check, made out for a significant amount, was proof of something they'd never believed I could achieve. They had all written me off as the one who'd never make anything of herself. Aunt Ruth took the check in her hands, her eyes scanning the number on it, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of surprise in her face. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice faltering slightly. I nodded. "I'm very serious." Uncle Ralph, who had been laughing a minute ago, stopped. His face darkened. He glanced at my mom, who still hadn't looked up from her plate. The silence was thick now, as if the room had suddenly become too small for the weight of what had just been said. "You don't really think this changes anything, do you?" My mom finally spoke, her voice flat and dismissive. "It's just a book, just some temporary thing." Her words cut deeper than I expected, but I held my ground. "Maybe it doesn't change anything for you," I said, my voice steady. "But it changes something for me. I'm doing what I love, and it's paying off." I could feel the tension rising around the table, and for a moment, it felt like the air itself was thick with everything unsaid. My mom didn't approve. She had never approved. I had been the family's embarrassment for so long, after my divorce, my career choice, and every decision that didn't fit into her picture of what I should be. Aunt Ruth and Uncle Ralph passed the check around the table, each of them muttering under their breath as they glanced at the number. My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't just about the money. It was about validation. Validation I had never gotten from my family. The success they'd always told me was impossible for me to achieve, I had proven them wrong. "You know, Sam," my younger brother, who had been quiet for most of the evening, spoke up. "Maybe we've all been a bit too hard on her." Everyone fell silent at his words. Sam, the problem child of the family, was usually the one who sided with Mom or Uncle Ralph. But this time, he surprised me. "I mean, she did it," Sam continued. "She's proven that she's capable. And we're sitting here acting like she's still some kind of joke." There was a long pause before my mom scoffed and muttered, "Don't get all sentimental on me now, Sam." But Sam was looking at her, his expression serious. "Mom, it's the truth. Can't you see it?" I was still waiting for the anger or the criticism to come, something to deflate my small victory. But no one said anything after that. The tension that had filled the room for so long hung in the air like a thick cloud. It wasn't resolved, but it felt different. The conversation seemed to stall after Sam's comment, and for a while, it was like no one knew how to respond. It was the kind of silence that was louder than words, a silence where everyone was too aware of the things they were too afraid to say. Aunt Ruth cleared her throat awkwardly, and that was enough to break the moment. She passed the royalty check back to me with a polite but strained smile. "Well," she said, her voice trying to sound casual, "I guess it's impressive, in a way." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was something. I didn't know whether to thank her or just leave it. Instead, I tucked the check back into my bag, feeling a strange mix of pride and frustration. The evening wasn't going the way I had imagined. I thought I'd walk in, lay down my success on the table, and have them recognize me for what I'd become. Instead, I felt like I was still the person they remembered, only now I had a bit of extra cash and a book to show for it. It wasn't that I was expecting an ovation or anything close to it. But the way they brushed off my achievement, like it was just some fluke or a passing trend, felt dismissive. It wasn't the validation I had hoped for, and it hurt in a way I hadn't anticipated. Dinner continued in the same awkward fashion. Mark, who had hardly said a word since I walked in, was now scrolling through his phone, and Lynn kept talking to Aunt Ruth in that voice of hers, the one that carried with it an air of superiority, as if she had everything figured out. I kept my eyes on my plate, not really hungry, but trying to avoid looking up at any of them. My mind was buzzing with a mixture of anger and disbelief. It wasn't about the book anymore. It wasn't even about the royalty check. It was about how little they saw me, how little they had ever seen me. Eventually, the dinner was finished, and people started to get up, moving to the living room to lounge around, sipping wine and talking about anything but me. My mother had already retreated to her corner of the room, where she sat in silence, as if pretending I wasn't there was enough to make everything normal again. I went to the kitchen to grab another glass of wine, and when I turned around, Sam was standing in the doorway, looking at me. His face was unreadable. "You know, you don't have to let them get to you," he said quietly. They're just like that. You've always been different, and they've never liked it." I stared at him, unsure of how to respond. Sam had always been the least predictable of us all. He could be cruel one moment, then surprisingly supportive the next. But this? This felt like a shift, like something in him had finally recognized the weight of what I was going through. "I'm fine," I muttered, but it wasn't convincing. I could feel my throat tightening, the old hurt creeping back in. It wasn't about needing them to approve of me anymore, it was about finally wanting to feel seen by them, to be accepted for what I had become, not for what they wanted me to be. But it was clear that wasn't going to happen. Sam stepped into the kitchen and leaned against the counter. "I know you're fine, but you're not acting like it. Look, I get it. They're all messed up, but you can't let them do this to you anymore." I looked at him, trying to hold back a mix of emotions that I couldn't quite place. "I didn't ask for their approval," I said quietly, my fingers wrapped around the wine glass. "I just thought, for once, they might see me. For once, they might see that I've done something, that I'm not a failure." "Yeah, well," Sam's voice softened. "They don't know how to see people like that. They'll always see you as that kid who messed up. And nothing you do will ever be enough for them. But it doesn't matter anymore, does it?" I didn't know how to answer him. It did matter, in some way. Of course, it mattered. I was still their daughter, their sister. I was still the person who had spent years trying to earn their approval. I wanted them to see me as strong and successful, not as some disappointment they had to put up with. "But it's not about me anymore," Sam continued, his eyes steady on mine. "You're not playing their game. You've won. You're making a living, you're doing something you love, and you've proven you can do it on your own. That's all that matters." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to feel that peace, that sense of finality that he seemed to have. But the truth was, it wasn't that simple. It wasn't just about me doing something I loved. It was about how my family saw me. It was about how they had treated me for so long. And it hurt. Sam sighed and stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I don't think you need them. But if you're ever gonna stop caring about what they think, you have to start realizing that you're enough, with or without them." I nodded, but it didn't feel like enough. It wasn't enough to make the sting of their rejection go away. It wasn't enough to erase years of being told I wasn't good enough. The evening dragged on after that. My mom continued to avoid me. Uncle Ralph exchanged a few more sarcastic remarks, but this time I didn't react. I wasn't here to start a fight, I just wanted to leave with some sense of dignity, some feeling of closure. But it was hard to shake the feeling that I was still that girl who never quite measured up to their expectations. Eventually, people started to leave. Mark was the first to go, barely sparing me a glance before slipping out the door. Aunt Ruth was next, a quick goodbye and a cold smile. I knew what they were all thinking, none of them had expected much from me. And none of them would ever see me for who I was now. It wasn't until I was putting on my coat to leave that my mom finally spoke to me again. "You're really serious about this writing thing, aren't you?" she asked, her tone softer than usual. I turned to face her, feeling the weight of the years between us. "Yes. I'm serious." She looked at me for a long moment, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something that resembled respect in her eyes. "Good," she said quietly, turning away. "Maybe there's hope for you yet." And just like that, it felt like she had said everything, and yet nothing. The words weren't enough to undo the years of hurt, but they were something. I didn't expect her to suddenly embrace me or even apologize. But in that moment, I realized that I had long stopped needing her validation. I had come into my own, regardless of whether she approved or not. I left the house that night with a mix of feelings. A part of me still wanted their approval, still hoped for their recognition, but another part of me, the stronger part, had realized that I didn't need it anymore. The drive home was quiet. The lights of Darby Hills faded in my rearview mirror, and I felt like I was leaving something behind. Not just the house or my family, but the version of me that had needed them to see me as something more than the disappointment they always thought I was. I had proven to myself that I could be successful without them, and that was enough. But that night, I realized something else, too. Success wasn't just about making it in my career. It was about not letting the past define me, and not letting anyone, not even my family, dictate my worth. The following days felt different. I woke up each morning with a sense of quiet determination, but the sting from the dinner, from that night with my family, still lingered. It was like trying to wipe away the ink of a permanent marker. No matter how hard you scrubbed, the stain always remained. I knew I was stronger, that my career was thriving in ways I had never imagined. But a part of me still couldn't shake the feeling that I was never going to be good enough for them. I tried not to let the weight of their opinions affect me, but it wasn't easy. Every time I opened my inbox and saw another congratulatory message for my book hitting the top of the charts, I couldn't help but wonder if they'd ever see me as more than the girl who divorced her high school sweetheart, the one who chose to leave a stable life behind for something as uncertain as writing. Every time I checked my bank account and saw another payment from my book royalties, I had to remind myself that I had earned it, and that I had worked tirelessly for the success I was seeing. But the nagging feeling, the sense of wanting their recognition, still crept into my thoughts. It was exhausting, but I couldn't help it. I called Sam a few days after the dinner, needing to hear a familiar voice. I knew he was the one person in my family who at least tried to understand me, even if he hadn't always been the most reliable or supportive in the past. He answered after the first ring, his voice lazy but warm, like he'd been waiting for my call. "What's up?" "I don't know, Sam," I sighed, pacing the small apartment that had become my sanctuary. "I can't stop thinking about it. About the dinner. About how they still see me. It's like no matter what I do, I'm always going to be that screw-up in their eyes." Sam was quiet for a long moment, and I could hear him shifting around on the other end, probably lying back on his bed like he always did when he was thinking. "Yeah, I get it," he finally said, his tone surprisingly serious. "They don't know how to deal with you. They never have. They don't get that you're not the same person you were when you left Peter. But you've changed, and they haven't." "I know," I whispered, my fingers gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. "But it still hurts. It's like I'm always fighting for their approval, even though I don't even need it anymore. I just want them to see me." Sam let out a long breath. "I think you've got to stop giving a crap about whether they see you. You've been doing this thing on your own, making it on your own, and that's more than they'll ever be able to understand. I know it's hard, but you've got to realize that you're your own person now. You don't need them to validate you. You're doing it without them." I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. I know. It's just hard. I don't know how to let go of that part of me that still wants them to be proud of me." "Yeah, well," Sam said softly, "it's okay to want that. But you can't let it control you. You've got this, okay? You've already proven more than enough." I hung up the phone after a few more words of encouragement from him. It felt good to talk to him, to hear someone finally speak some truth into my life. But I still couldn't shake the emptiness, the space between where I was and where I wanted to be. It was like I was standing on the edge of something big, something that could shift my whole life, but I still couldn't take that final step. I spent the next few weeks working. It was what I did best: immerse myself in the craft, focus on the stories I was telling, and push everything else aside. I was on a roll, writing the next book in the series, getting more and more positive feedback from readers. But even with all that, the quiet part of me, the part that needed my family's approval, kept pulling me back into the past. The small interactions I had with my mom in the years before the divorce and the dinner lingered. Those moments when she told me that I would never amount to anything, those words still echoed in my mind. I found myself checking my phone every morning, looking for a message from her, wondering if she'd reach out. But days went by, and nothing came. She didn't call. She didn't text. It was as if our conversation at the dinner had never happened. I knew she wasn't going to apologize. I wasn't expecting an apology. But the silence, it hurt. It was like I had given her a chance to see me for who I was now, and she didn't take it. I kept reminding myself that I didn't need her approval, that I had made it without her. But it was hard to shake the ache of wanting her to be proud. Wanting her to say, even just once, that she was happy for me. But I was learning to be okay without it. Slowly. The real turning point came about a month later when I got an email from my publisher. The subject line read, "Exciting news regarding your book sales." I clicked on the email with trembling hands, not sure what to expect. The message was short and sweet, congratulating me on another milestone, but the kicker was at the end: "We would like to discuss the possibility of adapting your book into a movie or TV series. Please let us know a convenient time to discuss further." My breath caught in my throat. A movie? A TV show? I stared at the email for a long time, the weight of it sinking in. It was happening. Everything I had worked for was coming together, and it was bigger than I ever thought it could be. My book, the one that I'd written alone in my tiny apartment, the one that no one believed in, was now something that could potentially be on the big screen. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel that joy. The kind of joy that comes from knowing you've built something from nothing. From knowing that you did this. But even then, in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder what my family would think. Would they finally be impressed? Would my mother say something? Would she acknowledge that I had made it? But no matter what they thought, it didn't matter anymore. I was standing on the edge of something huge, something that I had earned, and no amount of their approval or disapproval was going to change that. I picked up the phone and called Sam first, needing to share the news with someone who would understand. "You won't believe this," I said, my voice trembling with excitement. "They want to turn my book into a movie or a show." Sam's laugh on the other end of the line was full of genuine happiness. "Heck yeah. I knew you'd make it. I knew you'd show them." I laughed too, wiping away the tears that I hadn't even realized had started to fall. "Thanks, Sam. For everything. I wouldn't be here without you." "Keep kicking, dimwit," he said before hanging up. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was on top of the world. Maybe my family wouldn't ever understand what I'd done, but in that moment, I realized that I didn't need them to. I had something even better, my own sense of accomplishment. And that was all I really needed. The next few weeks after that phone call with Sam felt like a whirlwind. My publisher, ecstatic about the sudden attention my book was receiving, quickly set up meetings with a couple of agencies who were interested in adapting it. I barely had time to process it all, everything was happening so fast. The emails, the phone calls, the meetings. I felt like I was finally in the world I had always imagined for myself, the world where I was a successful author, recognized for my work, and, most importantly, independent. And yet, even as my career was soaring, there was still that nagging thought in the back of my mind: what will my family think? It had been nearly 2 months since the family dinner, and I still hadn't heard from my mother. I kept telling myself that I didn't need her approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. But deep down, I still wondered if they'd ever see me differently. Would they care now? Would they finally acknowledge the person I had become? Then, one afternoon, the inevitable happened. I was sitting in my apartment, surrounded by stacks of notes for my next book, when I saw my mother's name pop up on my phone screen. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't spoken to her since that dinner, and the fact that she was calling now, it felt like both a relief and a trap. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello?" "Lena," my mother's voice was cautious, almost too careful. It sounded like she didn't know how to start. "I'd been thinking." I waited, not sure how to respond. My mind raced. Was she calling to apologize? To finally say something nice? "I know we don't always see eye to eye, and I know I've been hard on you," she continued, her voice tight. "But I heard about your book. And I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. I almost dropped the phone. For a moment, I couldn't process what she was saying. Proud of me? The words felt foreign, as if they didn't belong to the woman who had spent years telling me I wasn't enough, that I'd never make anything of myself. I appreciate that, I said, my voice betraying the mix of shock and bitterness I felt. It wasn't that I didn't want to hear it, it was just that it felt too little, too late. It didn't undo everything that had come before it. It's been a while since I've heard you say that. I know, she replied, and there was a slight crack in her voice. I was wrong. I should have supported you more. I should have been more proud of you. You've done something impressive with your life, and I can see that now. I wanted to scream. To tell her that it wasn't enough. To remind her of every time she had told me I wasn't capable, of every time she had brushed off my dreams. But I didn't. Instead, I took a breath and, in a voice that I barely recognized as my own, I said, I've worked really hard for this, Mom. You didn't think I could do it, but I did. And it's not just about the book. It's about me, proving to myself that I'm worth something. Worth more than the person you thought I was. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I almost expected her to hang up, to cut me off like she had done so many times before. But she didn't. Instead, she sighed. I can't change the past, Lena. But I want to try. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but maybe we could start over. Maybe we can build a new kind of relationship. For a second, I almost considered it. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could let my guard down. But then, the image of that night, the dinner, the mocking tone of my uncle, the way my mother had dismissed me so easily, flashed in my mind. And I knew. It wasn't enough. Not yet. I think, I said, my voice steady, that I've learned to live without your approval. It's been a long time coming, and I'm doing just fine. I don't need your validation anymore. But I'll accept the fact that you're trying. That's enough for now. The words were final, and for the first time in my life, I felt a weight lift off my chest. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was just done. Done trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. Done seeking approval from people who had never been able to see me for who I truly was. I understand, she said quietly. I hope you know that I do want the best for you. Thank you, I said, and then we hung up. A few weeks later, I got the call. The one that changed everything. My book was going into development for a TV series. The contract came through, the cast was being lined up, and the team was working to turn my story into something bigger than I had ever imagined. And just like that, it became real. It wasn't just a dream anymore, it was my reality. That night, I stood in front of my apartment window, looking out at the city lights below. The success I had been chasing for so long was finally in my grasp. And the best part? I had done it all without them. Without my mother's approval. Without my uncle's mocking. Without my family's scorn. I had done it for me. And that was the sweetest victory. Then, just as I was about to sit down and celebrate the success, I got another call, this time from Sam. You're not going to believe this, he said, sounding giddy on the other end. Mom just called me. I frowned, a little confused. What now? She said she's going to come to the premiere of the show, he continued. She wants to show you that she's proud of you. She said she didn't realize how much you'd accomplished until now. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to say no. I didn't need her approval anymore. But another part of me knew that this wasn't just about her. It was about me. About how far I had come, and about the kind of person I had become. You know what? I said, smiling. Let her come. Let her see. I'm proud of what I've done, and I don't need her to say anything to make it more real. But if she wants to see it with her own eyes, then fine. Sam laughed. You've got a point. It's all about you now, Lena. You've earned this. I hung up the phone, feeling a quiet satisfaction wash over me. I had finally done it. I had taken everything they threw at me and used it as fuel to create something beautiful, something entirely my own. And no matter what happened from here, I knew I had proven to myself and to everyone else that I was worth it. And as for my family? Well, they could come to the premiere. They could see the life I had built without them. But by the time they arrived, I'd be too far ahead to care whether they saw me for who I really was. Because I already knew. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge.